and welcome to another episode. My last segment shot here at the 2019 International UFO Congress. I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm here with James Tyson, and he has a podcast, The Oracles with James Tyson, and he has it listed as spiritual, supernatural, parapsychological. And you can find his website at theoracleswithjamestyson.com. James Tyson, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. I've been hanging out. I'm only another booth over, so we spy on each other. It's been a lot of fun here. Have you had a good time?
Oh, absolutely. I got some great interviews. How about you?
Well, I've got a lot of names because I haven't been doing interviews here, but I've just got them set up for when I get going home. I think I have 46 set up right now. Fascinating people have been through here, experiencers of not only UFOs, but I was just talking to one a short time ago, but he has Bigfoot coming to him all the time. And it's an amazing thing that he is actually kind of poking around and actually talking to other people and other experiencers who have similar stories. So it's getting those similar stories and putting them together. And I'm having a great time meeting all these people.
Yeah, me too. You've been around a while, but for my viewers that may not be familiar with your work, go ahead and talk a little bit about your show.
Well, as I said before, I was born at a very young age in a small town. Oh, anyway, I had an internet radio show. I was on for 4 years. Did the weekend show. It was live, 9 till midnight Pacific, which was awkward when your guests came from the Eastern Seaboard and they had to stay up from midnight till 3 in the morning. And I left that in 2017, end of 17. Took a year off and got asked to do a podcast. So now my podcast is about an hour and 20 minutes, hour and a half long, so you can kind of listen to it on the way to or from work, or cut them up and listen to them all day long. And they're pre-recorded, so they get uploaded every Tuesday and Thursday onto the website, and they get fanned out onto everything. So if you're looking for something to listen to, the oracleswithjamestyson.com, or they blast onto Facebook, onto iHeartRadio, I don't know what other platforms they have out there, iTunes, all the other ones. It's amazing where it goes once I hit enter, and poof, it goes out there. YouTube, things like that. But I've been having a good time with it. I get to travel. I was a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for 28 years. I've seen dead people all my life. And then when I was a policeman, I saw dead people too. It was interesting. It was an interesting life looking back at it, and it's now got me to a place as I'm retired. I can go out and talk to people who've had the same experiences, similar upbringing around ghosts in their house. And now I'm actually getting out. I've been seeing UFOs. Went up to Melinda Leslie's tours of Sedona, which I'm going out on tonight or tomorrow, one of the two nights. And we take the night vision goggles, go up and watch these things travel in groups of 3, 4, 5, up to 9, flying around and stopping in space. And they look like satellites, but satellites don't travel in groups. Right. So that's interesting. I host a number of paranormal documentaries that are in pre-production right now. A couple have already been completed and will be out in another month or so. One, we went out on a Bigfoot kind of investigation, got a lot of footprints. It came into the camp, moved our game cams, which hindsight is we should have had the game cams pointed at each other, but moved the game cams and hundreds of footprints that weren't there the night before or the day before, all about 10 yards from where we were sleeping uncomfortably in a plywood shack. And we definitely would have heard somebody pounding these footprints in 2 or 3 inches into the springy pined soil. So I've been doing a lot of things like that, and it's been a lot of fun. And what I can tell you about myself, I saw the shadows in the bedroom when I was a kid. I had a bad car accident I was in when I was 16, went to the hospital and actually saw the driver of the other car being led away. When his son was with him, about 5 years old. Looked fine. My parents, I asked them later, did anyone else die? Or anyone else die? Was anyone hurt? And they said yes. The the other driver, his son, had passed. And I said, well, when I saw him, he looked fine. It must have been internal injuries. And my mom and dad just stared at me. I was like, really? Okay. Well, he died in the car. So he couldn't have been at the hospital, but I described him head to toe. That was the son. And it was even years later, at 25 years, you could go back and look at the death certificates online and showed him, he passed in the car. And it was wild. It was absolutely wild. And then in 2012, I went to a psychic for the first time. A friend of mine said, you really should go to a psychic and talk to them about these things. And, I don't believe in that stuff. So around beginning of November 2012, I go to a psychic who basically knows me as Jim and has my phone number. Go in, see her. She says, oh, your mother's with you, and describes my mother over my shoulder and describes her to a T, but my mother passed when she was 85 years old, but describes her in her late 20s and early 30s, which was, if you knew my mother, it was a party time for her. And then she also knew my mother's name was Lexa, Lexa. She said, your mother's name is Lisa? I said, oh, Lexa. I'm like, what? And she said, and your mother wants you to know the things you thought were ghosts you saw when you were a kid? Yeah, those were ghosts. So things are starting, I'm looking at this psychic like, whoa, this is crazy. And she said, you're also something called an empath. And you can read cards like this for people. And now I'm like, okay, you knew my mother's name was Lexa. Like that, you cannot find that information connected to me online, nothing. And her description of what she looked like in her late 20s, early 30s, like to a T. And then everything else she said, I had to take as, oh crap, okay, this is legit. She also identified 3 challenges I was going through at work, then identified how each of those were going to successfully come out on my behalf. Again, completely bought into it because, well, first of all, she had no way of knowing the 3 challenges, my mother's name, etc. So stress being the loss of control or the perceived loss of control of a situation, with all this preemptive accuracy, I could only look at it as being, oh, I'm going to come out okay. Everything's going to turn out. So I no longer had stress over it. Within 3 months, I was reading oracle cards for other people. She got me hooked up with that day she had me hooked up with a paranormal group. The second outing with them, I was having a conversation like this with a disembodied woman who was doing it through a digital recorder with headphones on. So I sat down at this table in a haunted location where I heard that she was around and said, so why are you here? And it's as clear as day through the headphones was, because I can't let go. I thought, okay, I peed myself now. This is now interesting. So I hung around with the paranormal group for a bit, but they really don't ever get yourself involved in a paranormal group that just goes out to investigate, find a haunting, and then invite all their friends to poke at the ghost. If you find somebody who's dead in a house, ask them if they want to cross over. Why are they there? Ghosts exist. You don't have to go out and try to prove a ghost exists. Heck, they're all over the place. They're just easier to see in places where there's a lot of energy, like moving water, which is the big one for the Pacific Northwest where I live. You know, the ocean comes through between the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State and the tip of Vancouver Island. That tide coming through there creates such energy. It's one of the most actively haunted places around, where it's not really more haunted than anywhere else. You just see them walking down the street, which is crazy. But yeah, we've got great pictures of ghosts anywhere from Northern California, San Francisco, all the way up north of Vancouver, British Columbia. It's easy to take pictures of ghosts. Yeah, so we do that. So I go out and do that, do the hosting the paranormal shows, documentaries, and bouncing around. So I'm having a really good retirement at this point. I was been asked, like 4 years ago, I got asked to write a book. I don't even think I finished my last book. Well, I wouldn't have been reading it. I think I ran out of the red crayons when I was coloring it. So that's how long ago I've been around books. And people are handing me books lately, so it's kind of fun. So now I have to. How about you?
How did I get into this? Oh, wow. Talk about turning the tables around. This is what happens when you interview an interviewer. You should expect this, but I've done it to other people when I was on their show as well. How did I get into all this? I had a Bigfoot sighting when I was 10 years old. A very up-close Bigfoot sighting, like within 20 feet, like not a shadow in the distance. It was running towards me. I could hear it breathing. There was no way to mistake what it was. And a friend of mine was with me, so there was a witness. And I even had the wherewithal as a 10-year-old to write a report to the Bigfoot Research and Information Center. Peter Byrne ran that in Oregon at the time, and this was 1976. And I remember the year because there was a certain set of circumstances that dated where I was at that time. And they wrote me back. They actually responded, but they kind of blew off my report. They said that Bigfoot lives in Oregon and Washington and not in the Midwest, and dismissed it. And of course, the adults in my life didn't really believe me. And so I learned that you can see something that's not supposed to be there, that you can see something anomalous that changes your view of the world. And I also know what it's like to see something or experience something and then not have other people believe you. And so this led for a real hunger for all things paranormal. And I lived in a small town, and I went to the library. I read every book they had on parapsychology, psychokinesis. If there was a book on anything supernatural or paranormal or anomalous, I read it. I've never had a UFO sighting ever. I would love to see a UFO, but I just haven't been privileged enough to have that experience. And this interest in this subject has been with me my whole life. And I used to do psychiatric work, much like you. There was a time, at one point I even worked on a maximum security psych unit. And I've done that a couple of times. And so I saw some strange, anomalous things there, both explainable and unexplainable, but nonetheless phenomena. And I got burned out, so I left doing psych work, and I went to recording school, and I started working in the entertainment industry. I toured around. I did live sound reinforcement professionally. Eventually became the technical director of a performing arts center. Nice. And so through all that process, I learned about choreography and dance and staging and how to operate a fly rail. So if there's something in theater that you do, I learned how to do it. So my education and my experience went far beyond recording school. And I got a real love for entertainment. But as is oftentimes the case, entertainment jobs frequently don't have benefits. A lot of times when you do a show, the typical run for a show is 9 weeks. So while you know you have a job for 9 weeks, the whole time you're working that gig, you're eyeballing the next one and trying to line up the next gig. And I got tired of the feast or famine cycle that sometimes can happen. And when I moved to Southern California, I was a case manager at an outpatient psychiatric clinic. So then I was working with homeless population and helping get homeless people off the streets and also trying to help them with whatever issues they had, whether they were psychiatric or substance abuse problems. So that's what kind of work entailed in that. And I love that kind of work. And then I had another life change. I met my partner in Arizona, and I left Southern California and came here to Arizona. And I got inspired by watching YouTube. And believe it or not, like, it has nothing to do with this stuff, but I watched a guy called the Carpetbagger and Adam the Woo. And they just travel around and show weird things. And I was watching these guys, and, you know, none of us in this are like Hollywood body perfect types, right? And what really appealed to me, I'm talking about myself, okay. You're a handsome, powerful, intelligent man. And I stole that from Gene Simmons. Anyway, so I it appealed to me when I saw average people, or just like, people who look like us, the rest of us, and our neighbors and stuff doing these shows. And I had enough ego to kick in to say, you know what, I think I can do that. And so I already had the knowledge of the equipment. So I knew what equipment to get. I knew what the right microphone was, stuff like that. So I had some advantage in that. But my imagination about starting a podcast and what success looked like and what success meant was one thing when I started. And now that I'm into this just over a year, it's totally something else. It's more difficult than what I thought. Yeah. It takes more time than what I thought. Oh, yeah. Because I'm interested in quality and accuracy. And if I have a guest on, normally I'm on Fridays and Saturdays, and so if I have a guest on, I'm reading their material, I'm reading about them, I'm watching videos, whatever material's out there on my guest, I'm absorbing that for 3 or 4 days before they come on the show, because I want to know who this person is. Yeah. And it's a little different in this setting when I go out in the field and I do this stuff, because I meet people and things happen spontaneously. And so I let them explain for themselves their resume and where they're at, and I don't have to do that part for them. But I also like this because I enjoy the spontaneity of that. So this definitely takes a lot of bandwidth in terms of focus and attention, but I love this work. I love doing it, and I love the people I meet. So that's cool. So I had kind of a windy path myself.
It's still winding. It's you've, from your first experience, which your first contact, which basically handed you a question mark, and now you want to get answers. So you wrote to the Bigfoot people who were silly enough to think there was a Pacific Northwest issue, and then from there on, your questions needed to be answered. And it's funny when I listen to what your career path was, and I don't mean funny, haha, but funny, odd, or similar. Empaths, our career choices are maids, butlers, bartenders, waiters, waitresses, artists, chefs, musicians, nurses, EMTs, teachers, and in my country at least, police. Sorry.
Thank goodness. No.
No, but we gravitate to things where we like making other people, either we're helping other people, we are fixing, or we are preparing something that makes their life better and a little less complicated and a little more interesting. So you're a classic empath career. Plus, you were open enough to be gifted the opportunity to see Bigfoot, which in the where I'm from, the First Nations people there state that if you have that encounter like that, that's a gift that you got for a reason. And one of the reasons is to get your interest in other than the mundane day-to-day, this is how I'm going to live my life forever. Other people who've, in my case, it was pointed out, even though I had all this experience, the light wasn't turned on until 2012. I've talked to people here at this conference and watched their light come on, where I've said something to them and they said, well, I don't really believe in that, but I've seen UFOs all my life. Okay, sit down, we got to talk, because there's a reason for that. Tell me why you're not believing in it. And they'll get into a point where they talk themselves into understanding it. They end up getting up, walking over and talking to another experiencer, an author, and they realize, you know what? Yeah, I understand why now. And it's an okay thing to talk to other people about. And not everybody here are walking around kind of all weird and things like that. And it's changed over time. Yeah, you have a lot of experiencers who come from various backgrounds, and some might not appear to be an employable person, we'll say, but their stories are identical to someone else in another socioeconomic background. So why am I dismissing A from the facade that my human eye has put them under, and not B because this person finished university and has written books? Same story, two different peer groups, two different socioeconomic backgrounds. Got to take them all into consideration and listen And it's your job and my job to pull them aside and say, tell me what's going on. And what's gratifying for us is that question mark that we've been carrying around for that length of time actually never seems to be answered, but it leads us to the next question and the next question and the next question. I could go crazy on just the incident itself. We're hearing him breathe, or it breathe, she breathe. What color was it? What was the location? What was the time of year? What was the, which cycle was the moon? And we could drill down into that forever. But it was your experience and your friend's experience at that time, in your lives at that time. It was a seed planted. I believe it was a seed planted for something to grow later. And this, what you're doing, it's still waiting for that, whatever you planted, to bloom. And I don't know if we'll ever get the answers until I interviewed Jim Mars at one point. It was great. And I'm
jealous in a good way.
He passed away about 6 or 7 months later, and the first thought I had was, well, he knows now.
Yeah.
Like all the questions, everything he did to not believe this, and had a conspiracy about that, and this was a conspiracy theory. When he passed, I wasn't overly sad. I was almost happy. Like, now you can write a book. And of course, I'm not going to read it till I die. But at least Art Bell the same way. It's like, oh, this is going on, there's conspiracies, and there's ghosts and aliens, and they infiltrated the government, and oh, crap, maybe not. Look, I know now what's going on. But again, they have the answers, and we are running around trying to find them from other living people, which is a pain in the butt. And that's why in my podcast, I started off doing paranormal, but it's all... I talk to psychics. When I do an investigation, when I am out looking for Bigfoot or doing a UFO thing, or in somebody's basement, haunted basement, there's a psychic connection. I have the psychic on a phone. It was hilarious. Skeeter Wellhouse is the psychic I use a lot. And on my show, if you had a ghost, if you and your family think there's a lady in a blue dress upstairs, what we do is I will interview you to determine if those noises are actually squirrels in the attic, or you've got something else going on. And when I determine, this is it sounds like a legit issue, then I phone Skeeter via Skype, bring her in on the phone call, because this is not live, it's not broadcast live, so she can't be hearing what the other conversation was. I call her in. She's in Maple Valley, Washington. I am just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia, and our caller might be calling from England somewhere. And Skeeter literally takes a deep breath and shows up in their house, walks in the front door and describes, this is what the house looks like, this is where I'm going, this is where I see you. Oh, by the way, I've asked 3 ghosts who want to cross over. I told them to wait outside, and which always happens. And then she'll describe, okay, there's an American Indian gentleman sitting at your kitchen table, and I go around the corner, oh, there's a lady in a blue dress upstairs. At which time, if you're my caller and have the suspected spirit, what I'll do then is you and I will interview the ghost through Skeeter.
Wow.
So we'll find out, what is the connection to the house? Why are you here? What are you doing? Why are you opening the cupboards and slamming them? Do you want to cross over? And if we can talk them into leaving, or if they don't want to leave and there's the client still wants the ghost out of the house, it's a little bit hard. So what we do is I kind of talk the client into letting the ghost stay, but we negotiate a living arrangement with the ghost. Like, please don't turn the TV off in the middle of the night. We know, we know you're here. We understand. If you want to cross over, you can. Just look for the light. It's always there. And that's what we do. And I think it's fascinating. So I'm always bringing that psychic in. Actually, one of them, we did a house where my paranormal team investigated a year before. It was like built in 1905. The lady who owned it collects crystals. She would go out in the rivers and pick up crystals and then sell them, and she was an energy healer. So a wonderfully energetic house. But she had seen things in the kitchen, and she was curious about that. So myself and the paranormal investigator, before we really got connected to the psychic side of things, came into the house, and it was kind of interesting. The feelings that I was getting was there's definitely somebody there, but really happy. And went into the old 1905 dining room, which is creepy as heck because it was dark, and she kept it like it was 1905 with dolls. Don't do that. It scares the heck out of me anyway. And those little cheap old, I always use the cheap EMF detectors because you basically need friggin' 1,000 watts to get the lights to come on, as opposed to a real good one, skookum one, an electrician would use, because you can get those going off all the time through a house. So the cheap little plastic ones are great, and they will not go off on your body. They're not like a real electrician's one will go off around your heart, your forehead, your watch, whatever. Anyway, these ones won't. All of a sudden, I felt goosebumps on my entire back, and then slowly go through my entire body. I could feel them go through it, and I just froze. And I took my EMF detector, and my buddy was videotaping it. I said, "Look," and the lights were going off as it was going through my body. And then I had my left hand stretched out, and I could feel it going through my hand, and the lights were going off. And then right afterwards, I felt I was kissed right on the upper cheek on my right side. It was one kiss, and I'm thinking, what was that? It was like a goosebumpy kiss. And the second one, and I looked at Mike and said, she just kissed me. So it was interesting. We kind of recorded it. Very spooky house. A year later, I do one of my live radio shows, and we do a visit and remotely to this house. So I know what the house looks like. I've got photos of it and the whole bit. Skeeter has no idea, but because I'd actually been there, she could take the deep breath and attach to it, because I'm concentrating on the house. I'm looking at a picture from Google Maps or Google Earth of the house, and I'm focused on it. She goes, "Okay, this is where I am. I'm coming at this side," and she's totally describing exactly what I saw, where the kitchen was, how it was laid out, the creepy dining room, and then she said, "This is a new attached wing, and it's just filled with something that's beautiful and glowing." The new attached wing was her energy healing area with all the crystals. Well, we end up bumping into the lady who walked through me. She didn't kiss me. In fact, she didn't like me. I was, how if you do a paranormal investigation, you ask a question, and you wait 20, 30 seconds? She couldn't answer, and by the time she'd build up enough energy to answer, I had asked the next question, and she got so pissed with me that she walked right through me. But the kiss came from an 8-year-old girl ghost. We identified a farm worker who died in the 1940s at about the age of 40, a woman who died in a car accident, and she never crossed over because she didn't go to the light, and she thought, maybe this is where I'm supposed to stay. The young girl showed up from a car accident. There was something very, very evil and dark around the corner in a room, but a human, just a prick who didn't come out. And then upstairs with another elderly ghost. And so Skeeter is telling me about these ghosts, and it was the little girl who was talking to us about telling Skeeter what was going on. And we crossed, and there was the little girl that kissed me, and it was funny. I said, "Okay, so it was the 8-year-old girl that kissed me up here? Like, I'm 6'2". How did she get up there?" Skeeter laughs and said, "Well, she's a ghost." Duh. So it was the 8-year-old girl who kissed me. We crossed over the lady who walked through me, crossed over the farmhand, crossed over the little girl, but before she left, she says, "Well, there's Nana upstairs and there's Nana downstairs." Well, downstairs Nana was the lady who walked through me. Upstairs Nana was a Chinese woman who followed the occupant home from one of her crystal expeditions up in an area in British Columbia where there was a lot of mining and putting tunnels through roads and things. And what they did is the Chinese, the senior, one of the Chinese women used to have kind of run the tong. I shouldn't say run the tong, but she was responsible for the employees. So if there was 100 guys working on a mining or a railway crew, the checks would go to her. She would take a percentage and then distribute them to everybody. The Tong also took a percentage, and that was to assure if that Chinese worker died, they would intern them in British Columbia or anywhere in the Pacific Northwest or where this would have happened. And then after their bodies decomposed, they would bring them up, clean the bones, wrap them up, and send them to their hometown in China. And that's what that extra money went for. Well, this elderly woman was probably in her 80s in 1890. But because of the woman who lived there and her energy, she followed her home. And she liked upstairs because that was a sewing room. So she hung out in the sewing room. And we were fascinated. And we said, and I said, through Skeeter, I said, what are we doing with her? She goes, oh, and she'll go to the light like everyone else. And I said, what's going on? And you got to keep bugging the psychic because she's not saying anything unless I ask a question almost. She's like watching something and you have to kind of draw it out of her. I say, what's she doing now? She doesn't want to go until she takes her tea set. So she wrapped a silk cloth around a little tea set. I said, okay, I'm ready. And then there was a pause and I said, okay, what's going on now? And usually they'll say, well, the light is here and their cousin has come and got her. The little girl, her parents came and got her and took her. The other woman, it was a brother or a sister that came and got her. And for the elderly Asian lady, it was fascinating because as I'm waiting for Skeeter to tell me what was going on, Skeeter says, I don't feel well. I feel like I'm all wobbly. I'm wobbling back and forth. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, I don't know. And then she said, oh my God, I'm on a boat. And she was standing on what we would describe as like a duck hunting punt in a river, wobbling. So it was fascinating that the Chinese lady from the 1800s crossed a river to get to the other side. So we determined that we cross in what our belief system is. So her belief system, we cross a river. Everyone else in the house, the Anglo types from the 20th century-ish, all crossed to the light.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So and that's just one of the things that we do. Actually, we do that on the podcast. So you could, if you have a ghost in your house, go to theoracleswithjamestyson.com, send me a letter, find me on Facebook at The Oracles with James Tyson, send me a text, and we'll put you on a show, and we'll have Skeeter remotely show up in your house and go through your underwear drawer. Go check out your ghost.
That's awesome. This is a fascinating conversation. James, please tell me that you'll come back on my regular studio show sometime.
Oh, anytime. Yeah, anytime.
What we have here at the UFO Congress is increasing levels of chaos around us because we're in a vendor booth and everyone's disassembling, and this is the end of the convention. So this is my last interview of the convention, and I saved the best for last because I love talking to James. Not only does he have great speaking skills, he's got fascinating stories, and I know that I, for one, am going to be checking out his show. And I think you should too. And he's been a great vending neighbor this week, and I really look forward to getting to know him more. And I have a feeling that we'll both be talking to each other. So I want to thank you for tuning in. You could have been doing something else with your time, but you chose to spend your time with us, and I appreciate that. If you haven't hit that like button, please hit it. If you haven't hit subscribe, please subscribe. Hit the alert bell, and please, if you like this video, share it. I'd like for other people to see it. Thank you very much for watching Mysterious Forces Live. This is our wrap from the 2019 International UFO Congress right here in Phoenix, Arizona. I'd like to thank Alejandro and Karen so much for all the hard work that they did to put this together, and all the friends that I saw that are here, and new friends that I met. So I want to thank you, my audience, for sticking with me, and we're going to just move on to bigger and better things because we're kind of in our second cycle of the show, and we're going to be moving forward. So thank you so much for your time. James, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Natasha.
And we'll see you on our next studio show from Mysterious Forces Live.
All right. Did you ever do this again?